Hey everyone, welcome to the Viva Misa podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Williams with Modern in San Antonio. And we are talking about the intersection of art and design in San Antonio and beyond. So we are excited today to have some very talented guests with us. I'm going to introduce them as we go down the line. First, we have Audrey Flores, who's an artist and has recently exhibited at Confluence Park. Next, we have Ashley Mireles, who is with the San Antonio River Foundation. And we have Cara Salinas, who has also exhibited her work at the Confluence Park recently. So, ladies, welcome to our podcast. It's so great to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So first off, I was going to start with Ashley. Please tell us a little bit about your role at the San Antonio River Foundation and how you're seeking to activate public spaces with art.
Sure. Well, thank you. I work as a public art curator at the San Antonio River Foundation, and so on the art project side or the public art side, that includes working with communities or stakeholders to identify goals for projects, and then facilitating those processes, selection of the artists with those community groups or stakeholders, and then facilitating the project throughout from design to installation. And then on the programming side, I'm really fortunate enough to have a really supportive team that is allowing me to explore new ways to engage artists, I think more immediately, and inside of spaces that we have, including Confluence Park. So figuring out ways to do that, creating program opportunities or ways for artists to be presented by the San Antonio River Foundation is something that we're exploring.
What about the design of Confluence Park really makes you excited to activate that space with public art?
For Confluence Park specifically, I think that to start with, it's located in an urban ecosystem restoration zone, and it's 8 miles long, and that means that all of the plants, all the flora that you see there grew naturally and by natural sunlight. And so to me, I think that is a really exciting and unique way to have that possibility to experience art that is in the open, that you can come upon, or just experiencing art in a new way as a viewer, I think. And then also, in this case, providing opportunity for artists to experience or explore that opportunity as well. Mm-hmm. And then Confluence Park itself, I think that it's an artwork itself, and so there's some ways that I think when we're looking at projects, proposals, or artworks, how it could be complementary to the space, or that they're just both equally, I think, presented still in some way that they accentuate each other's style and design overall. And so I think Confluence Park definitely has a design that lends itself to that, where artworks that we've seen there seem to be presented in a different way that I think is more exciting. Again, I know with Cara's artwork, that's what I'm thinking about primarily, how it was, what she can talk about more, but seeing it suspended under the ceiling and following the form of the structure itself really gives you something exciting to look at.
Audrey, please tell us about your background a little bit and how what led you to become an artist.
I am, my background is in teaching. I taught in a first grade classroom for over a decade. So that's where my education is, and that's where I kind of started with my creative output there. But I didn't actually start showing my work until after my son was born. He was born in 2012, so 2013 I started showing my work. Like I said, I've always made work, but something happens when you become a mom and you just need to cling to your identity in a way. And it was this desperate attempt to hang on to my voice, during this huge transition. So now I make sculptures, installations, paintings, and drawings, but primarily I work with organic materials to create my work.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, could you talk a little bit about your installation that was there at Confluence Park?
Yes, it was called Play and Decay at the Confluence. It was really exciting for me. I do organic installations often, but this is the first time that I've done it outdoors and where we had the intention of letting it just decay. Usually I'm trying to preserve the materials and the installation as long as possible, and I'm touching up and I'm replacing things and removing things that are rotting. But the whole purpose of this was to just kind of allow the material, which was flora, local flora, organic materials, to just go right through with the process naturally.
Mm-hmm.
So I created this large flower serpent, and it was, so it kind of had the body of a snake, but then opened up like a flower. It looked really animated, long tongue, and it was made from from a lot of things, but primarily cactus pads. Those were the scales of the serpent. And then the mouth, maguey leaves, so huge agave leaves, and lots of flowers in there. So,
That's great. How long did it take it to become one with the earth again? Was it out for a while?
yeah, it was up for about a month,
Okay.
and it didn't completely, succulents are amazing. They're really, really made to persevere. And some of the cactus pads really did, just almost melt into the earth. But a lot of them kind of curled up to protect themselves. Some rooted, some even sprouted new.
Wow.
Yeah, so they became a part of the park, which was really important to me and kind of the whole point of the whole installation, that it was this living and dying organism, just like everything else around it. And so it was a month. It was a month
Wow.
to see some of those things transform.
Mhm. Great. Did you pair that with a workshop? I was trying to.
Yeah,
guess
yeah,
that. Okay.
yes, we did. So the final touches of the installation included a workshop where we invited participants to. We touched up a few things in the installation, but primarily we created the serpent tongue, which was a really long kind of parade of tiny little red agave flowers that were like in bloom during that time. So we arranged that, and then we did some harvesting in the park. Kara was one of the participants. It was really
Great.
cool, and we harvested some little yellow flowers from the palo verde trees that kind of border the entrance of the park, and created a big eye as well for the flower serpent.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Now, you touched on a little bit about how some of the organic material you want to try to preserve, and you had a show at Saladias recently, right, where was that what kind of an example of where you try to kind of keep the material in place and preserve it with those pieces?
Yes, it's always like an attempt, right? Because it's a collaboration when you're working with natural materials. I only have so much control. But indoors, you don't want things like decaying or rotting, like wet. But yeah, so at Saladias, I had multiple, it was like different installations, but the whole exhibition was built primarily around two large sculptures. And the sculptures, the primary material I used for the first one, which was a giant barn owl or lechuza, was corn husks. And then the giant hydra that I had, which is like a multi-headed snake, was bay leaves.
Wow.
So those were dry. The material's not living anymore, but it's still organic and still can possibly rot and decay. It definitely is brittle and breaks away and deteriorates. So yeah.
Got it. So once that material starts decaying, do you kind of hold on to the photography of those pieces as kind of the more precious thing that lasts throughout time? Is that
Yes,
good?
documentation is huge, because even before it's no longer usable or when it's time to let it go, it's already transforming. It's really interesting. Even in the span of, I think that show was up for maybe a little less than 2 months. The bay leaves are already transforming. It just depends, the kind of air it's exposed to, things like that. So yeah, that's part of it. You have to capture the moment, which is what makes it exciting for me, but also stressful and exciting.
I can imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, Kara, we'll move on to you. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into being an artist.
Sure. My background is primarily in architecture. That's where my formal education lies. I too have been a teacher for over a decade, from art history to career technology education. I kind of like to think of myself kind of like that multi-purpose tool. But this has been a long time of my being. Just creating and building has kind of been part of how I've made my time, like use of my time. When I met with Ashley out at Confluence Park to discuss the installation of Tensillation, I spoke about how that area was important to me because I grew up at my family's workplace, often during the summers, and like all kids, when you're at your parents' work, you're pretty bored.
Yeah.
I was fearless, so everything was my playground, from like outside to inside, and I just would explore and build, and I would often build little paper boats and sail them along the streams, and it was just a really great environment. It really lended itself to curiosity and play and growth.
I was thinking about when you were mentioning Tensillation, there was a little bit of play going on there too. They're kind of based upon kites, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So I always lean into, I think very much like what you were talking about with your piece, just playing and play-based. You know, we're both moms, and I think that also kind of helps with that because, you know, we're trying to still be part of that because that's part of our lives, and, you know, have our children be part of it, but also just understanding that those who come and see art, they're all sizes and, you know, all ages. And I think that that's important. So Tensillation is based on flying kites, taking flight. And I did use a lot of the construction properties for it, success from tent making to exactly like flying kites, suspension, tensile structures would be employed. Mm-hmm.
How difficult was it to get those things up there in those archways? I can only imagine.
It took a team. It did take a team. Yeah. It was difficult, but it was fun as well. I will say partnering up with San Antonian River Foundation and Ashley and the folks that she introduced me to was really part of the success. So from figuring out a way to allow it to be part of that form, how it undulates, that was problem number one. So I taught myself how to weave some nets, and that was fun because I was able to reconnect with the work on a different scope, but it was very necessary for it to be successful through the duration of it, you know, being on display. So, and then also a team coming up with ideas of how to utilize the pores that are in the structure as a secondary to keep it in place with some eye hooks. It was really a team effort.
Yeah, it was a beautiful installation.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, good. You are also currently pursuing your master's in architecture at UTSA. Can you tell us a little bit about that and maybe how you plan to integrate art into your projects?
Absolutely. I was so excited when I saw that question because I was like, yeah, of course, you know. And right away, day one for my advanced design studio, we were introduced to a book that we're going to read. And first page, it reminds us that to be a creator is, you know, it's instinctual. And everyone's a creator. They just aren't aware of it, you know. So I right away was like, okay, that's a great question. So for me, I plan on using what I've learned as a public artist to help me with my designs, you know, designing spaces. Oftentimes, my work, I feel that, you know, yes, the space is beautiful. Yes, it lends itself to creative thought and inspiration. But it's like almost like perhaps maybe the planner didn't think about, right, the people that are going to be coming through those spaces. So as public artists, we're thinking about those who are going to be viewing our work. So I plan on keeping that in mind as I continue my studies and continue my growth in architecture design.
Fantastic. That's great. I hope you'll share some of your projects
Absolutely.
online. I'd love to see what you got going over there. Perfect. Well, Kara had mentioned, she'd mentioned kind of the interaction with public art and how everyone's kind of a creator. And I was curious to propose this question, and Ashley, I was wondering what you thought. Like, if everyone's kind of creative, which I feel like they are as well, why do you think some people get a little intimidated by art and maybe they don't show up at the museum or don't show up for, to see the public art opening or whatever? Do you think that there's a reason why people would be
Sure.
intimidated? Yeah.
There's several different reasons. Whether it's, I think, just their own experience. It's not that it's not present, like the knowledge that's there or that the resources that exist, but it's about understanding or feeling comfortable that they can apply for opportunities or that they have the experience that public art administrators are looking for public art projects or opportunities. And so there's plenty of artists that won't apply for, let's say, an open call or a request for qualifications for a public art project because they don't believe that they have the experience whenever experience might be one of the scoring criteria. But there's different ways that they can apply with having the experience, I think, and that could be creating teams or all the different experiences that they could possibly have in their art practice that really does actually lend itself to an art project, especially because they can be at different scales or scopes. So if you're talking about budgets that are between $5,000 and $15,000 versus something that might be over $25,000 or over 250 or million or more, because in those cases, people are looking for specific criteria for the different projects. But this type of program, Art in the Open, I think allows artists to kind of dip their toes into that. I don't think that there's a whole lot of difference between creating, or maybe there is, where they're talking about installing artwork on a ceiling, but you're still creating artwork for different spaces, but looking at the opportunity differently, and then taking that experience with them, including the project management that they're doing during that time. So working with contractors, and then getting the work installed, also is something that I think that they have the opportunity to experience, and that would allow for them to be more comfortable, I think, when applying to more typical type of public art opportunities that are permanent and maybe not part of a temporary art program.
Gotcha. Okay. And when those kind of call to apply, situations arise, is that coming through the San Antonio River Foundation or just the City of San Antonio or both? Or
Both.
Both? Okay.
We're not related entities, but we do often work together.
Okay.
So the City of San Antonio has their own Department of Arts and Culture. They have their own open calls for all their opportunities, including exhibitions or public art, and that's separate from the San Antonio River Foundation. Okay. So in order to discover the opportunities is also something that I think reaching people is something that everyone is always trying to do.
Gotcha.
So even the City of San Antonio, where they have like a really large number of artists that they've worked with, is always trying to reach more artists. And so the San Antonio River Foundation is always trying to grow and reach more artists as well. Great. And provide those opportunities, and then just get more experience, I think, with artists. At the same time providing these really unique opportunities for visitors or art viewers to experience art as well. Also, I think outside of an environment that they might not otherwise find themselves in, or maybe they don't like museums and it's because they think they don't like art, but then they're on a jog or on their bike or just walking down the river, and then they happen upon something and discover they do like art.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
And so can people just be looking at your Instagram or social media to be seeing the open calls?
Yeah, social media is a great way. That's the way that we find that we can reach the most people, the most active way, I think. We also do an e-newsletter or newsletter that we send out monthly, which has all the opportunities in there. And then we just keep promoting as much as possible. And that's going to be mostly through our newsletter. And then because of our partners like the River Authority or the City of San Antonio, they might also share those
Perfect.
for us.
Okay, perfect. And I don't want to, miss this. You are an artist in your own right as well, and a very successful one. Could you tell us some things around town that people could maybe notice that you have installed?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just a couple. I don't like to keep things. So public art's great for that. And then otherwise, I'm thinking of murals that have been temporary in the past, usually for exhibition. I do like to make drawings. And I've been very fortunate to have a couple of public art opportunities or projects that are in the city of San Antonio. And those were based on drawings of local flora, and one is a wildlife blind that's at Hardberger Park at the Tobin Land Bridge, and the other is at the San Antonio Public Art Garden on the Riverwalk on Market Street.
The last question I wanted to ask to all of you, are there some spaces in San Antonio that you would love seeing activated with public art, and where do you think, where would you like to see that?
Well, I thought about that question, and I think that anywhere that's being underutilized, there's parking lots that go, like they're huge, they're enormous, and they're underused, and then perhaps buildings, vacant lots. I think that it's an opportunity where someone can come in and use it, and then it give to the inhabitants, the local inhabitants, and it kind of gives to them and their day-to-day, which would be wonderful. So that's what I thought of.
That's great. Audrey or Ashley, any other places?
Yeah, it's been really hot out, and while driving, I observed so many folks just baking at bus stops, and I think that that's such a easy way to incorporate art as like a structure for shade, but also plants. I'm really interested in the plant and art intersection, and like plants can totally grow and vine easily on beautiful structures. So I think that would be something that's fairly easy, but also really needed.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
I would probably just add, I really like the idea of having places where it's more unexpected, or places like that we just normally use as people coming in and out of. But it's also like a whole area that is really unimaginable of how that could happen. And so that's what does appeal to me about
Right.
it, is how fun that would be.
Yeah, that's great. I love that kind of unexpected element. That's fantastic. Well, good. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining us today. And it was really interesting conversation. I loved hearing your ideas and thoughts and how you work and operate. It was great. So, do you have anything to add that you'd like to add? I don't want to stop anyone.
I'll add that we will have the San Antonio River Foundation.
Yes.
We're getting ready for our second open call for this program.
Okay, great.
So last year we hosted the first open call for Art in the Open, and we received about probably 90 applications from artists with different practices and backgrounds from around San Antonio and a little bit beyond. And so the plan is to, in mid-September, to open a call for the next year's Art in the Open series as well. So the plan would be for it to open mid-September and then close at the end of October.
Okay.
So that's something that we definitely want to share.
Okay, perfect. And you can kind of sign up for your newsletter to see that coming through,
Yes.
as well as social
Right.
media. Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
So keep an eye out. And
Everybody, watch
yep.
for it. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah.